The markets are pricing a near 100% probability that the U.S. Fed will approve a quarter percentage point increase at the conclusion of its two-day meeting today. According to Goldman Sachs, economic and market cross-currents will lead the Fed to signal a policy pivot this week. For more on the hot Fed decision day, let's cross over to London, where our Rise business analyst Bode Ososami has been following the U.S. FOMC meeting since Tuesday. Great having you on board tonight, Bode. Thank you so much for coming through. Let's get started. Any surprises in the statement from the Fed today? Talk to me.
Well, no, and good afternoon. Thanks for having me on the show. No surprises, and no surprises that there are no surprises. I have the statement in front of me. The first sentence reads, the economic activity expanded at a modest pace in the first quarter. Job gains have been robust in recent months, and the unemployment rate has remained low. Inflation remains elevated. Now, on the banking system and the turmoil in the banks, the statement reads, the U.S. banking system is sound and resilient. Tighter credit conditions for households and businesses are likely to weigh on economic activity and inflation, and the extent of these effects remain uncertain. So that is what really we expected. And talking about future guidance, although I read in some places that this is signaling a potential end to hikes, I think that's a very optimistic interpretation of the statement. It says, in determining the extent to which additional policy firming may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, and economic and financial developments. In addition, the committee will continue to reduce its holdings of treasury securities and agency debt and agency mortgage-backed securities and so on. It is a short statement, as it usually is. We expected 25 basis points, and that's what we got. I guess the detailed press conference, which begins in about 10 minutes, will give more detail, especially on future guidance and how the banking turmoil is affecting the trajectory. But based on these statements that reaffirms the soundness and resilience of the banking system, the robustness of the job growth, and of course, we'll talk about the ADP data later. It does look like Fed policymakers, they have the words here, not exactly boxing themselves into saying no further rate rises, but just saying that, look, depending on the data, we'll do what is needed to stay, to get down to the 2% that we want to be. But the other thing, of course, is he will leave the door open for different scenarios, and I think that we'll see more of that when he speaks in 10 minutes' time.
Yes, of course, everyone's on the edge, trying to get to hear from Jerome Powell. But when you look at the US ADP data, which came in strong today, how did that affect the decision at the FOMC, if at all?
Well, like many are saying, what recession, and the first line on the press release is that economic activity expands at a modest pace in the first quarter. And I guess what he's saying there is there really is no problem with the economy, and there's still lots of optimism that a soft landing is still possible. But 296,000 jobs in April, more than double the downwardly revised 142,000 the previous month, and well ahead of estimates by wide margin. Pay growth continued to slow down. Job changers in particular saw a dramatic decline, with pay slowing from 14.2% growth to 13.2% growth. That's the slowest pace of growth since November 2021. And when pay growth is slowing down, the pressures on inflation, of course, will abate. Nella Richardson, that's the chief economist of ADP, says the slowdown in pay growth was the clearest signal of what's going on in the labor market right now, adding that employers are hiring aggressively while holding pay gains in check as more workers come into the workforce. Looking at details, goods producing sector added 67,000 jobs. Service providing sectors added 229,000 jobs. Most of that came from leisure and hospitality. The higher paying sectors like manufacturing and financial sector actually lost jobs. Financial sector lost 28,000 jobs. Manufacturing also took a hit, losing 38,000 jobs. So in summary, unexpected net growth in hiring, especially in low pay sectors, and of course pay gains for people changing jobs slowed down, the picture will boost the Fed and Treasury position that the soft landing is still in the cards, and maybe move Monetary Committee to keep going after inflation with rate hikes, given the resilience of the economy and a jobs market that is still far from weak. But I'm sure there will be questions on this and the response during the presser.
Well, during the presser, but still with Jerome Powell, are you looking to hear anything different from what the press statements that have been released will tell us? Do you think he will say anything different from what we already know, or is just going to read through this?
Typically, the statement is a very high level summary, but the more detailed issues will be probed further in the presser, especially the questions. And of course, he knows what's on the mind of people. Are we going to have a clear signal of some sort from him on pausing? That is not evident from the statement I've read almost thrice. I can't say anything in it that says that, but I guess the presser is going to be asked in a more direct way, and is going to say, I guess, that it also depends on the data, which is how it really should be. Mind you, when we get to this stage where we are at the end of this cycle, the risk of misstep is very, 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 very high. You can do too much or too little, and that ends up messing up all the work you've done in the last 2 years. So I think they are going to be very careful. You're going to hear a statement that is more non-committal and more careful not to get into missteps, rather than a statement that tries to please traders.
Okay, today is Jerome Powell. Tomorrow is going to be Christine Lagarde at the European Central Bank. What's the likely decisions tomorrow?
Well, Lagarde is somewhat lagging behind in the cycle if you compare to the US in terms of their own hiking, but the decision is not as clear-cut. The data points to much more tepid growth than what we are seeing in the US. Inflation is quite sticky, especially core inflation. German retail sales data for March was very disappointing, showing a 2.4% month-on-month drop in retail sales, much worse than 0.4% expected. Inflation in Germany eased, yes, to 7.2% year-on-year, down from 7.4%, just slightly below expectations of 7.3%, while Eurozone inflation data showed that the core harmonized index of prices, that's when you take out energy goods, food, alcohol, and tobacco. It was 5.6%, just below 5.7% that we saw in March. In France, inflation actually rose from 5.7 to 5.9%. So the European Central Bank will see very early signs of abating pressure on prices, especially the sticky core inflation is a red flag for them. Analysts suspect a higher chance of 25 basis points. While still dangling a possibility of future hikes depending on the data. For fear of overdoing acceleration with 50, Lagarde would add the normal blend, hawkish and dovish expressions like, let's wait to see the impact of previous hikes and the work is not done, and so on. So I'm saying a 60-40 chance in favor of 25 basis points, but you can't rule out 50 basis points, maybe with a more dovish guidance. But clearly, there's still a lot to do with inflation, with this, all the geopolitical turmoil not exactly over, the Ukraine situation. Oil prices, yes, they are going down today, but the dynamics are not very clear in terms of whether they could not still go back up. So it's a much more unclear situation, I would say.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got a whole lot. It's a busy time today, tomorrow for you, but they will get together tomorrow to look at the ECB decisions as well. Thank you so much for those perspectives. Bode Ososami, Business Analyst in London. Enjoy the rest of your